My friends left me out of their wedding invitation, then criticized me for not being able to attend on short notice. Apologies for the lengthy backstory. I've added a brief summary at the end. I'm mainly seeking advice, but here's the context. My friend Greg, 28, met Shannon, also 28, around 5 years ago, and they clicked right away. Shannon quickly became a favorite in our group. She's amiable and really boosts the energy of our gatherings. They became the golden couple in our circle, enhancing every event with their presence. When they announced their engagement, everyone was thrilled, albeit not surprised. The anticipation for their wedding was palpable among our friends. Then the save the date magnets started appearing on refrigerators, and the excitement grew. However, it was painful to see these reminders on other friends' fridges, knowing I hadn't received one. The feeling of exclusion was profound. I understand that wedding planning can be immensely stressful and that the couple has every right to invite whoever they wish. It's their special day, after all, and they shouldn't feel obliged to include anyone who doesn't fit their vision of the day. I kept my feelings of hurt and exclusion to myself, not wanting to be viewed negatively or make a scene. Despite my silence, the topic inevitably came up when our group discussed travel plans for their destination wedding in New York City. When asked about my own plans, I had to admit that my girlfriend and I hadn't been invited. This revelation surprised everyone, but I downplayed my disappointment, knowing how these situations can spiral. I wanted to avoid any drama that might make the couple resent me, casting me as the villain. Later, I learned from mutual friends that Tracy found it incredibly unfair that I was left out. Tracy and I never discussed the fact that I was overlooked for the wedding invitation, but it was clear it bothered her. About a month before the big day in New York City, I unexpectedly received a text from Greg. He apologized for the oversight and expressed a wish for us to attend. By then, it was impractical for me. Securing time off work on such short notice was impossible, and financially, I wasn't prepared for the steep costs of a last-minute trip to an expensive destination. I had not saved for the event like the others, who had a year's notice. The logistics of flights and accommodations were also problematic. Everything was either booked or exorbitantly priced. I replied to Greg, explaining that I couldn't attend. The wedding happened, and afterwards, seeing the joy and celebration in the Facebook photos, including one labeled The Crew, deepened my sense of exclusion. It was a painful reminder of being on the outside, looking in. This incident triggered a cascade of negative thoughts. I wondered if they found me annoying or worse, insincere in my efforts to be pleasant, perhaps even a nuisance within the group. The old saying echoed in my mind: if you can't spot the odd one out in your circle, then it's probably you. Then Shannon's message arrived on Facebook, inquiring why I hadn't responded to the RSVP. The irony stung. How could I RSVP to an event I was never formally invited to? She mentioned they missed my presence there, which only intensified my feelings of being unfairly portrayed. Though I wanted to express my frustration, I restrained myself, fearing it might only worsen my situation. Instead, I apologized vaguely and even praised the wedding photos, affirming how delightful the occasion seemed. My response was crafted to ease the conversation for Shannon, yet afterwards I couldn't help but feel like the fool in the narrative. Since that incident last summer, my interactions with the group have dwindled, and I sense a palpable shift in dynamics. Occasionally, I bump into a few friends, but the atmosphere has changed. My recent birthday invite on Facebook went unanswered by them, hinting at conversations happening without me. It feels like I'm being subtly ostracized, perhaps because Greg and Shannon aren't fond of me. My fiance, who gets along wonderfully with Shannon, is bewildered by the situation. Her confusion only deepens my sadness. She's such a kind person and doesn't deserve this confusion. I'm torn between explaining to her that I seem to be the odd one out for Greg and Shannon and maintaining silence to avoid feeling more defeated. I've kept these feelings to myself until now, not wanting to stir further discord among friends. In fact, this is the first time I'm sharing this ordeal, as I wanted to avoid seeming contentious. Tracy's support during this time has been a silver lining. She defended me when no one else did, although she isn't aware of how much her support meant to me. Her actions were a rare beam of solidarity in what has felt like a sequence of disappointment. As I reflect on these experiences, the sense of isolation becomes overwhelming. It's disheartening to think that when I plan my own wedding soon, the guest list might be very short, Tracy being one of the few definite attendees. The dilemma of whom to invite looms large. How do I ensure my actions aren't perceived as spiteful retribution? How do I navigate this seemingly toxic environment that I didn't create? Am I overreacting, or is it as bad as it feels? These questions haunt me as I ponder over my upcoming wedding and the potential absence of friends. The advice I've stumbled upon suggests a tough but necessary stance on self-respect. It might be time to distance myself from those who clearly don't value me as I do them. Thanks for reading and responding. I've been contemplating what to do next, and I think I'll have my younger brother act as my best man. Considering everything, I might forego having groomsmen altogether. It's frustrating that despite my efforts to avoid conflict, I still ended up being portrayed negatively. It's disheartening, truly. Could it be possible that Greg was responsible for sending the invites and simply forgot? Or maybe the invitation was lost in the mail? I recall a time when an invitation I sent was returned a month later. Luckily, I had sent out save the dates early, which prevented any misunderstandings. It seems Shannon believed you had received an invitation since she was puzzled about your absence from the RSVPs. You did inform Greg via text, but perhaps she expected an official RSVP response. The possibility of a misunderstanding exists, but the rumor that I hadn't received a save the date or an invite was already circulating early on. Tracy was vocal about her displeasure with my exclusion. It felt like the other friends either didn't think it was a mistake or were withholding information they were uncomfortable sharing. Remarkably, only Tracy stood up for me. Following some of the advice I received, I decided to discuss the matter further with Tracy. She bluntly told me that Shannon was trying to deflect blame when she questioned why she hadn't received my RSVP. Whether it was an oversight or a deliberate exclusion remains unclear, but Tracy promised more clarity after her workday. After a thorough conversation with Tracy later on, some unsettling truths came to light. It appears that Greg's best man, who wasn't part of our usual circle but has known Greg since childhood, has always disliked me. Greg himself finds me irritating. Shannon, feeling remorseful about their decision to exclude me, pushed Greg to extend a last-minute invitation through text, likely knowing my attendance would be impossible. It turns out that Tracy wasn't the only one who felt it was unjust that I was overlooked for an invite. The buzz around this issue led Shannon to inquire why I hadn't RSVP'd, possibly to suggest that my invite had been misplaced. It's somewhat comforting to know this, as it aligns with their right not to invite anyone they prefer not to have at their wedding. However, learning that Greg harbors negative feelings towards me is quite painful, especially since I always considered him a friend. It appears he was being deceitful about our relationship. Most of our mutual friends, having deeper ties with Greg from high school, seemed inclined to align with him, influenced perhaps by Tracy's outspokenness on my behalf. This revelation caused a ripple of guilt among them, though they felt compelled to pick sides. Many have expressed remorse over the situation. The advice to adopt a more assertive stance was particularly constructive, and I appreciate those who delivered their suggestions respectfully. On a side note, some commented on avoiding two-faced individuals, jokingly warning me of potential financial disputes reminiscent of times when such friends would split the bill unevenly, yet claim they'd settle it later, a promise seldom kept. Thankfully, I no longer have to subsidize their extravagant meals. Regarding my own upcoming wedding, I'm not inclined to create a divide among friends by playing into the drama of choosing sides. Those who supported me will certainly receive invitations. As for Greg, he and his best man, who has never been popular in our circle due to his abrasive nature, can keep their cynicism to themselves. In an interesting turn of events, after being advised to confront Greg directly for clarity, I received an unexpected apology from another mutual friend who confirmed my suspicions about the situation. Not everyone was on board, but Tracy was the only one who boldly defended me. It seems their mistake sparked a chain of drama within our group. Some opted to keep me uninformed to spare my feelings, a decision I understand, but which only increases my appreciation for Tracy's candor. In his final comments, Rairajan expressed that from his view, I wasn't the one at fault, especially considering the awkwardness of a destination wedding. He pointed out the additional strain of choosing a bustling city like NYC for such an event. He noted that people often change after getting married, possibly becoming more insular as they spend more time with their spouse than their friends, drawing parallels to how relationships evolve from high school to adulthood. It turns out Shannon had familial reasons for choosing NYC, wanting to be nearer to her relatives. It seemed that once other friends voiced their concerns about my exclusion, Greg and Shannon felt pressured and doubted their initial decision to not invite me. Rairajan suggested that it might be best to let them face the repercussions of their actions and simply move on. The hope is that they might learn and grow from this experience. Though Greg has always had a rather cynical outlook, people can change, though it's uncertain. Switching gears to another scenario, story 2 involves a rather perplexing interaction. After a decade together and 6 years of marriage, my husband's interest in me has waned, leading to an odd request. He asked me to flash road workers, an act that unexpectedly enraged him when I complied, resulting in him pushing me out of the car. He's become distant despite subscribing to several OnlyFans accounts, indicating he still has desires. I've tried to rekindle our intimacy by offering to explore new experiences with him, yet his responses have been dismissively brief. During a recent gathering, our conversation with friends turned to the topic of roadwork delays in commutes. One of the guests humorously mentioned they'd found a novel way to make their drives more interesting, hinting at unexpected antics on the road. To my surprise, the couple burst into laughter as they shared their antics during the roadworks, which span about 3 miles with several groups of workers along the way. They described how they slowly drive past each group, and at each pass, she flashes them to cheers and applause. It was hard to believe considering they usually appeared quite reserved. That evening, after our friends had left, my husband remarked on their daring behavior, suggesting we try something similar the next day. Considering his usual conservative attitude towards public displays, like his discomfort over a simple bikini picture on social media, I was taken aback by his enthusiasm. Yet, that night, he was more affectionate than he had been in months, initiating intimacy for the first time in a long while. The following morning, he brought up the idea again. I double-checked if he was serious, concerned about whether it was appropriate or even wanted by the bystanders. He assured me, claiming confidently that it would be well received. As we approached the work site and neared a group of workers, he excitedly cued me. I complied, and the workers responded with cheers as he had predicted. However, the situation took a shocking turn. Just after the act, he abruptly hit the brakes and furiously demanded I exit the vehicle. He was visibly enraged, calling me offensive names and physically forcing me out. This caused a scene, blocking traffic and drawing the attention of the workers nearby. As he aggressively pushed me, causing me to nearly fall out, 2 workers rushed to my aid. One worker confronted my husband, trying to open his car door, while the other helped me out of the vehicle. In the confusion, my husband drove away, leaving me on the roadside in my casual home attire without my phone or keys. The workers kindly covered me with a jacket and escorted me to their nearby canteen for warmth. They offered me a cup of tea and comfort as I processed the whirlwind of emotions, from the initial playful act to the distressing altercation. The rapid sequence of events left me both grateful for the workers' help and deeply humiliated by the exposure and subsequent conflict. I repeatedly apologized to the workers for the unusual situation, explaining that it was my husband's idea. They reassured me that such incidents were not uncommon and they often witnessed similar events, although I suspected they were just trying to make me feel better. Despite the awkward circumstances, they maintained a lighthearted demeanor, cracking jokes and treating me with kindness. When I mentioned needing to contact someone, I realized I didn't know any phone numbers by heart except for work, and I didn't want my colleagues to see me in such a state. Recognizing my dilemma about how I was dressed, the team leader decided against calling a taxi and instead instructed one of the workers to drive me home. They offered me some spare work boots to navigate the muddy path to their van and then drove me the 5 miles to my mother's house, ensuring I felt safe and comfortable throughout the journey. Upon arriving at my mother's, I was overwhelmed and broke down in tears. The workers briefly explained to her that my husband and I had an argument which led to him abandoning me roadside. My mother invited them in for a drink and I attempted to return their coat and boots, but they insisted I keep them. I told my mother a simplified version of the events, omitting the more violent detail. Back at home, I collected a few belongings and returned to stay with my mother. I found my phone left on the table, indicating my husband had been there. Over the next few days, he called repeatedly, apologizing profusely and claiming a comment from a bystander had triggered his outburst. Friends advised me to leave him while he begged for another chance, suggesting couples and sex therapy, though he was reluctant to involve outsiders in our issues. Torn about the decision, I reflected on the incident, regretting my compliance with his initial request, given his insecurities. The brief moment of closeness had clouded my judgment, leading me to overlook his volatile tendencies. In a gesture of gratitude to the workers who assisted me, I returned their clothing, baked them cakes, and gifted them a large supply of Yorkshire tea. Commentary from friends and online observers echoed a stark reality. Couples counseling might not suffice in such a case of marked aggression. The prevailing suggestion was to consider more drastic measures like seeking legal advice to address the underlying issues in my marriage. The more I reflected, the clearer it became. After the incident, I documented the physical evidence of the assault, photographing the bruises and scrapes on my limbs. Staring at those images, I pondered what advice I'd give someone else if they were in my situation. Commenter 2 pointed out my codependent tendencies, highlighting how I've always tried to appease him out of fear of being abandoned. Yet, following his instructions led to abandonment anyway. He left me vulnerable on the roadside immediately after involving me in a reckless scenario. This act not only endangered me, but also made me wonder if he had hoped for something worse to happen. It's becoming undeniable that this environment is increasingly unsafe and likely will remain so. His resistance to couples counseling likely stems from knowing what the therapist would recommend. Moreover, such therapy might only provide him with further insight into my vulnerabilities. Instead, individual therapy for myself seems the more prudent path, helping me understand that no amount of concession can force someone to love or respect me. Following advice from various online communities, I contacted the police and reported the assault. The workers who helped me agreed to support my account. The police arrested my husband but released him on bail with a condition to stay away from our home, so he moved to his mother's place. In response to his allegations of infidelity among our friends, I felt compelled to clarify the situation. I shared a detailed message explaining the events, coupled with visual proof of my injuries and screenshots of his messages that included his directives and admissions of violence. While only a few friends reached out to apologize, my resolve has strengthened and I'm no longer burdened by their disbelief. These weeks have been tough, but enlightening. I'm no longer plagued by guilt for involving the authorities or for telling the truth about what happened. For now, I'm focusing on work and keeping busy as I await the legal proceedings. Despite the police's lack of confidence in securing a conviction, I've consulted with a lawyer. Although financial constraints limit my options, the incident has opened my eyes and I'm prioritizing my well-being above all. Reflecting on the incident, one moment keeps replaying in my mind: the sheer strength of the road worker who swiftly lifted me to safety, his actions as quick as they were gentle right before my husband sped off. It haunts me to think that in his rage, my husband might not have realized I was almost not clear of the vehicle when he decided to drive away. Currently, I'm in a secure environment. I don't believe I require additional protection since my brother has moved in with me, and he's more than capable of handling any physical threats. Jokingly, I say he could take on 10 men single-handedly. Moreover, I feel there are others out there who might benefit more from charity support than I. When it came to reporting the incident, I made sure to give the police a detailed account, as did the workers who witnessed the event. Contrary to what some might expect, the police focused their concerns not on the indecent exposure, but on the assault and the danger of being nearly run over. Thank you for tuning into this story. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so and click the notification bell to keep up with more startling true stories from everyday life.